Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Building a Ryzen 7 PC in March of 2018 plus giveaway. Now this is actually being filmed after I filmed the giveaway announcement video. There will be a link down in the video description below. Hopefully you're watching this sometime during March 2018. You can go enter to win this amazing Ryzen 7 1700X system or a Ryzen 5 2400G or two other awesome prizes with three other amazing channels all linked down below. That's not what this video is about. Instead, I'm taking all these parts and using it as sort of a general guide video on how I would put together a Ryzen 7 level machine in March of 2018 and address the question, should you? Because the next generation of these things is just around the corner. Now this will be a long video. I'm going to cover all the various components and talk about them in detail, so grab a cup of coffee, grab a snack, sit back and relax. This is mostly going to be a talking head video, so if you don't want to watch me and put me in the background, you can certainly just listen to me, but I am going to spend some time on each of these, so it will be a while. The first subject is the CPU. Now, we are limiting this to top-end CPUs, or at least performance CPUs. The Ryzen APUs and i3s and Pentiums are not included here because it just makes the subject too broad. I'm sticking to the machines in the $1,500-ish range, a little bit less, a little bit more, but definitely nothing under $1,000. So the APUs, Pentiums, and i3s are definitely not included. Now, on the desk in front of me here, I have the i7-8700K, the fastest gaming CPU on the market today, bar none, but also very expensive. Then we have a Ryzen 5 1600X CPU, or a 1600, take your pick, but this is a 1600X. And then of course the Ryzen 7 1700X included in this build. Now, interestingly enough, for the average person, unless you really want a specialized cooler, such as an RGB tower cooler, I would get the non-X versions of these chips if you're going with Ryzen. The Ryzen 7 1700 and the Wraithspire cooler that it comes with is just fine. It costs a bit less. It overclocks to 3.7 gigahertz on the included cooler without a problem, and that is an RGB cooler. It's not as fancy RGB as this, but it has an RGB ring on it. It's very, very nice. The Ryzen 5 1600 also comes with the Wraithspire cooler, also runs at 3.7 gigahertz with no complaints, no fancy voltage adjustments. There's just no RGB on the cooler. So RGB on the Ryzen 7 and no RGB on the Ryzen 5. 6 cores, 12 threads, 8 cores, 16 threads, same per core performance. The only real reason to go with a Ryzen 7 is you plan 5+ years of use and you want some future proofing, or you do content creation, multitasking, and non-gaming applications. There's no gaming benefit in 2018 and frankly in 2019 to a Ryzen 7 with 8 cores. 6 are plenty. Maybe in 2021 or 22 there is, and if you want 5 years, then yes, but you might upgrade before then. If you want high frame rate, if you want over 100 frames per second, if you have a 100 or 144 hertz monitor and you want the highest possible frame rates, the best possible performance, there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever the i7-8700K is the fastest. But you're really looking at closer to a $2,000 machine done properly, at least now with graphics card prices, maybe even more. So it's a great CPU, but it does cost more. It's faster. But faster in gaming mostly relates to the Ryzen 5 1600 is great up to about 100 frames per second. It really struggles to do more than that in most AAA games. This does 144 with appropriate graphics in an awful lot of games. So there's kind of that 40% FPS difference, but it's all above 100 frames per second. If you have a 60 Hz or 75 Hz monitor, there's virtually no gaming performance difference between these CPUs. Save your money, get a Ryzen. The circumstances where it makes sense to buy the X chips, the 1600X or the 1700X, is if you do plan to go with an aftermarket cooler and you want to try to get 4 gigahertz on all the cores overclocked. Some Ryzen chips will do it, some won't. My Ryzen 7 1700X will do 4 gigahertz, but it takes a pretty hefty cooler and a pretty decent motherboard. It's been hit and miss. I've actually installed it on 3 different boards, only one of which by the way is the giveaway board, which I've already used in my test bench, will do with a 240mm liquid cooler 4 gigahertz on all the cores. On a different motherboard, a cheaper B350 board with a tower cooler, it would not. So it is worth noting that 4 gigahertz is possible with Ryzen, but it's tricky. It's not a guaranteed thing, even with a big cooler. I did stick this CPU, by the way, on my Asus Crosshair Hero 6 board, which is an over $200 fancy high-end motherboard with a 240mm liquid cooler, and it would not do 4 gigahertz stable. It'll do 3.8 to 3.9, but that's an expensive motherboard, an expensive cooler, and it's only 1 to 200 megahertz faster in that situation than the stock cooler on a $99 motherboard. So honestly, with Ryzen, I think the real value is 3.7, maybe 3.8 if you want to push it. 4 gigahertz is hit and miss based upon, honestly, silicon lottery as much as anything else. That being said, I have 2 different i7 8700K chips. I've installed them on large tower coolers, not this, but the really big ones, Dark Rock Pro 3, etc., Noctua D15, and 280mm coolers on multiple motherboards. In fact, I've had 5 different Z370 motherboards on my test bench that you can't see at the moment, but it's back there. All of them, 5 gigahertz, no AVX offset, no problem, full AIDA64 stress testing. The overclocking ability of this is really good, but $350-ish and no coolers included and a more expensive board versus a whole lot less money, under $200 for this with a cooler included and a $100 motherboard. So Ryzen is the value. It's just not as fast. Again, how much performance do you want? That leads us to our second topic, motherboards, which actually, now that I have now used about 10 different motherboards for Ryzen, I can give you an actually very simple answer on motherboards. If you are building a cheap budget system with an APU, a Ryzen 3, or maybe a Ryzen 5 1400, get the cheaper boards. Get the $60 to $70 boards. There's really no reason to spend more on a motherboard because you're buying such an inexpensive CPU. Are you buying a Ryzen 5 1600 or 1600X? Buy something like this in the $100 price range. Now, I do like ASRock, but I also like MSI, Gigabyte, and Asus. They all make very nice boards. They all make boards at the $100 price point. If you're spending $200 on your CPU, the benefit to these is a little bit better power delivery, more features, 4 RAM slots, better audio, better LAN. It's just generally a better board across. If you're buying a $99 Ryzen 3 2200, this is overkill. A $200 Ryzen 5 1600? No, it's a very nice choice. Would I put the Ryzen 5 on an X370? No, I think that's a waste of money. If you're buying an X370, the only CPU to buy is a Ryzen 7. And even then, it's a maybe. SLI support, which doesn't exist on the B350, which I don't personally think matters anymore because SLI and Crossfire support gets worse every month, not better. But if you want it, for whatever reason, SLI support, you often do get better components. That board is $50 more than this one. It is not just SLI. It is not just the chipset. There's better LAN, better power delivery options. A number of things on the board, from audio to power, is just better. Overclocking, there's some, not all B350 boards, by the way, will let you manually put in the voltage. You can do a voltage offset, but you can't just type in a voltage. The X370 boards let you do it. So, if you want to buy an X chip and go to 4 gigahertz, definitely spend the $150 on a board. That being said, would I put a Ryzen 7 1700 with the stock cooler at 3.7 on a $99 board? Yes, I would. I have, and it works on all of them. It's going to 4 gigahertz where you want the better board, or SLI, or the better audio, or the better features on the board. That's a maybe. But the $99 price point is roughly the sweet spot for Ryzen, whether you buy a Ryzen 5 or a Ryzen 7. Now, as I said, brand, ASRock, MSI, Gigabyte, Asus. There's virtually no performance difference between them. It's price, RGB, the audio chip, the LAN chip, the number of slots, expansions, the look, the color. It is complete personal preference. I have all the brands. I've used them all. I've had all the brands with Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7. In fact, I've got 2 test setups downstairs, one with the B350 and one with an X370. And frankly, they're all very, very good. All the major companies have now updated the BIOSes, and RAM support and other things, we'll talk about RAM in a minute, has gotten much better. So seriously, pick based on your personal preference or price or sales or deals, more than any perceived difference that maybe one is better than the other. RAM choice. In March of 2018, if you're building a 6-core 12-thread or an 8-core 16-thread machine, in my mind, there's only 2 choices. You either put in 16 gigabytes or you put in 32 gigabytes. Well, possibly 64, but that's sort of a high-end configuration. The truth of the matter is most of you should put in 16. Whether you're going for the Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 or even an i7 8700K, most people, 16 gigs is the sweet spot. 8 is not enough. 8 is simply not enough RAM for anybody who thinks they need 6 cores, 12 threads. 32 gigs is really reserved for heavy content creators, multitaskers who are seriously doing a lot of stuff. And I don't just mean keeping 12 browser tabs open. I mean you're running 3 virtual machines. You're doing some stuff way beyond the typical user. Most people do not need 32 gigs of RAM. Now I do, because I do 4K video editing. In fact, my machine has 64 because I do it for a living. But even casual 4K video editing will work in 16 gigs. It's just nicer in 32. RAM's currently pretty expensive. You're going to spend about $180 for 16 gigs of DDR4 3200. So don't get 32 unless you really, really need it. But don't get 2400 either, because it doesn't save you enough. When I filmed this video in March, there was a $20 price difference between 2400 and 3200. That's not the place to save $20 in your build. If you're building anything that I'm discussing in this video, $20 is not going to make or break you, but there's no reason to go with slower RAM. Now, when Ryzen launched, RAM support was very hit and miss. Because of recent BIOS updates, and make sure that you update your BIOS on your motherboard, all of the motherboards now support either DDR4 2933 or 3200. They don't actually support 3000 even, although you can buy DDR4 3000. It will run at 2933. Now, not all boards will support 3200 on all kits, but a lot now do. So whether you buy 3000 or 3200, if you buy 3200 and it doesn't work, set it to 2933 and it will. I have now not found a mainstream RAM kit from one of the major brands that will not work at least 2933 in a variety of boards that I've tested in 2018. Now, what about system storage? First of all, you need an SSD. You certainly shouldn't be building a system like this in 2018 without an SSD. The question is, how big, and should it be SATA or NVMe? Well, first let's talk about how big. In my opinion, for a system of this level, 250 gigabytes will do, 500 gigabytes is better, and a terabyte is nice and a luxury, and if you can afford it, by all means, get as much as you can manage. But the real question is it worth the difference to go from a 250 gig to a 500 gig? And the truth is, yes, it generally is. The price difference is not double. In other words, you're doubling your space, but you are not doubling your cost. But since Windows and your base programs and installation and swap files and hibernation files take up a certain amount of space, you aren't doubling your usable space. You're often getting 2.5 times your usable space for not that much more money. A good simple example, looking at high performance but reasonably priced drives, the new Crucial MX500, which I've reviewed, excellent drive, fully recommended, $80 for the 250 gig size, $130 for the 500 gig size. So 70 to 130, it's a $50 increase. That is less than double. But you are more than doubling your usable space, and larger SSDs generally tend to be faster than the smaller ones due to increased parallelization. They actually have more chips on them, and so most SSDs, as you go up in size, at least to the 500 gig point, they are up to 10% faster than the smaller version. Now, putting size aside, then we come to SATA versus NVMe. In general, for most people, SATA is fine. You really don't need NVMe, especially if you're going with a Ryzen 5 1600. You're already compromising. You're trying to save money, save some money here, put it somewhere else. Your graphics card, for example, we'll get to that in a minute. But if you want more performance, or if you simply just want a little bit faster boot times or faster multitasking times, or you want the convenience of installing in an M.2 slot, well, actually, you can still do that with SATA, because you can get various drives. For example, the 860 EVO, this is an M.2. Now, it's still SATA, it's not NVMe, it's no faster than the 2.5-inch version, but it installs in the M.2 slot just like an NVMe does for a bit less money. Speaking of Samsung, if you can find a good deal on the 850 EVO, by all means, still buy one. There's no reason not to buy an 850 EVO. The 860s are out. They're very, very, very close. It's minor. But there are many other drives that I've tested. This is the ADATA SU800. It's an excellent drive. Then you have the Western Digital Blue, also a very nice drive. And then the SanDisk Ultra 2, which is remarkably close because it's owned by the same company as the Western Digital, and the Ultra 2 is also very good. That being said, if the prices are equal across the board, the two drives I would pick between right now is either an MX500 from Crucial or an 860 EVO from Samsung. The Samsung tends to be a bit more expensive, and frankly, based upon price, I would take the MX500, but they're both very good drives. You won't go wrong with either one of them. Now that leads us to the NVMe choices. I have tested a bunch of NVMe drives on my channel. The long and short of it, if you want the fastest, the best, the most capable NVMe drive on the market, it really is the Samsung 960 EVO and possibly the 960 Pro, although not in this equipment. The Pro only belongs in the high-end desktops, the Skylake X and the Threadripper. I think it's overkill in something like this. But a Samsung 960 EVO, a 500 gig drive, is roughly about $200 at the moment. A lot of the other drives are around $200, and so with the price being equal, just buy a 960 EVO because it's amazing. Except for the ADATA SX6000, which is going in this machine. The 500 gig version of that drive is closer to $150. It's $50 less. It is not as fast as the Samsung, but it is faster than the SATA drives for only about $20 more. It's a very nice compromise choice. So if you want a bit more than SATA, the convenience of M.2, but don't want to pay $200, consider the SX6000. It's sort of a tween drive, gets you the benefits of NVMe, not quite as fast, but frankly in a Ryzen you're not going to notice the difference. It's fine, and you'll save $50. And that $50 is much better spent somewhere else in your system, in my personal opinion. The truth is most people going NVMe are either going i7 8700K or Skylake X or Threadripper. Ryzen, yeah, it's nice, but save your money, put it in something else. That leads us into our GPU choice, and in March of 2018 when I'm recording this, this might be the most interesting part of the entire video. I did consider making it a separate video. I might actually record something different for this. Graphics cards at the moment are not priced what they have been for the past year and a half because of a combination of factors. Cryptocurrency mining, Bitcoin, is part of it, but also there's a shortage of the GDDR5 memory that they use because it's now also being used, or the same factories that make it are also being used to make memory for smartphones and other devices. And so there's actually a worldwide shortage of various memory chips, and a variety of factors has really messed up the market. Traditionally, a 3GB GTX 1060 should cost about $200, and a 6GB GTX 1060 should cost about $250. That is not what they cost at the moment, and you'll be really lucky to find those prices now or in the coming months. I do not expect this to change before summer at the soonest, and frankly, based upon various media reports that I've read, this may continue through the end of 2018. This is not going to be a short-term resolution. Currently, you're looking at about $300, give or take, for the 3 gig card, and up to $400 for the 6 gig card. I know that is way over normal retail, but it is what it is, and it's not changing in the next few weeks or possibly a few months. If you're building a system of any kind today and you want a mid-range graphics card, these are the prices you have to pay. It's that or don't, because there isn't much else to do. Now, a year or so ago, I filmed a video. It's one of the most popular videos on my channel, GTX 1060 3GB versus 6GB. When I did that, I was comparing 200 versus 260 at the time. They came down to 250. At that point, I made the comment that based upon that price difference and where the prices were, the 3GB card made more sense. But that was also 2016 going into 2017. We're now solidly into 2018. Games are advancing, the cards are aging, more VRAM is being used. I'm kind of on the fence here now at this point. I still think the 3 gig card is enough for most people, but when this is 300 and this is 400, you're now at a price point that it's like, well, yes, maybe just get the 6 gig card. I actually could understand that logic and reason. It makes sense now. And certainly if you find this for, say, 360 or 370 and this is 330, yeah, just get the 6 gig card. There really has to be a larger percentage difference before it makes sense. Please note, there is a difference here besides the VRAM, CUDA core count, the actual processors. This is, ignoring VRAM, about 10% faster for the 6 gig card than the 3 gig card. That's true of all brands, it's not just these two. So based upon the current market, unless you find a really good deal on a 3, I would take a serious look at the 6 at this point in 2018, both for the extra performance, the extra VRAM, and just the fact that these things cost so much as they are. Now, what about above these? I'll get to AMD in a second, but what about above these? The 1070s at a minimum are running $600, and most of them are running $800. Pretty close to where the 1080s are at. And 1080 Ti's are $1,000 plus. The graphics card market's really messed up. Unless you just really want to run high resolution, high refresh rate, 1440p ultra wide or 4K, I would really wait on those. First of all, we're less than a year away from the next generation 20 series cards coming out, so you're going to spend over the normal rate for 2016 technology, because these cards came out in the summer of 2016, And spending $800 for one of those just doesn't make sense to me at this point. If they were discounted and $500, maybe. But what about the 1050s? The 1050 and 1050 Ti are also over the normal rate. The 1050 Ti's are into the 200s now. Those were close to 100 not that long ago. Please note that a 6 gig GTX 1060 is 50 to 70% faster than a 1050 Ti, and the 3 gig 1060 is 50 to 70% faster than a non-Ti 1050. Are you saving enough? Maybe, possibly. But if you're building a 6-core or 8-core machine and gaming is one of your primary concerns, I would be really tempted to step up to the 1060. If a straight 1050, which is currently running about $180 for a 2 gigabyte 1050, if that's enough, maybe the APU is a better choice. The Ryzen 5 2400G, no, it's not as fast as that, but it's a real good value for the money and a whole lot less expensive. So that's a topic for another time. This is probably the sweet spot right now, just based upon current prices. Now, I mentioned AMD. Let's talk about AMD. Unfortunately, AMD cards are better at cryptocurrency mining in general than the Nvidia cards are, although that's starting to change. The AMD RX 580 is roughly equivalent to the 6 gig 1060. The RX 570 is roughly equivalent to the 3 gig in terms of performance, ignoring the VRAM differences because those are slightly different. If you can find a 4 gig RX 580 in the $300, $350 range, buy it. Unfortunately, that's a deal. It should be $200 as well, but it's not. Buy it. If you can find an 8 gig card for under $400, okay, fair enough, that's reasonable. That's hard to do right now. Those cards are running in the mid 400s, and if they're $100 more expensive than this, they're simply not worth the money. They aren't any faster than this. They don't have any features this doesn't have except for FreeSync, and if you really need FreeSync, fair enough. The cards below that, the 560s and the 550s, don't make any sense. You might as well buy the APUs. They really just don't make any sense at this point. Vega 56 and 64, forget it, they're expensive. The least expensive Vega 56 card that I have found lately is $850, which is crazy. So those don't even exist at the moment based upon current prices. Which leads me back to the 6 gig 1060, which ironically is, unless you find a really, really good deal on this for hopefully under $300 for the 3 gig, just get a 6 gig 1060 and be done with it. Yes, you're paying over the normal rate, but welcome to March 2018. That brings us to case choice. No, I'm not going to put 6 cases up here and talk about every case in the world because frankly, there are a million cases in the world and they're highly personal and highly customizable and there's just so many choices. There's no way to discuss them in a video like this. Instead, I'm just briefly going to talk about this case and why I think a mid-tower ATX case is the right choice for most people building a 6-core or 8-core machine just due to expansion, cooling, options, future upgradability, space to put stuff. Yes, you can do it smaller. I understand people do, and if you need the space, that's fine. But let me show you how nice this is inside. I am now standing to the side. Yes, you can see the reflection of the wall, and the stickers, by the way, for those of you curious down there, those are my daughter. She put stickers on my wall, so I will never take those off. You take a screwdriver here, and you simply turn this one screw 90 degrees, and then the panel comes forward. But it rests. And this is important. Unlike the cheaper cases, this is a really nice case. It actually has a rail mount that it holds on to rather than just, you have to hold it. And there's actually a grip here. There is a handle here to pull it off. So instead of having 4 cumbersome screws like I've covered on the cheaper cases, this is very, very well built. You simply take your hands here on the handles and you pull up and it simply comes up and right off just like that. There's a lip down here to set it on, and then it's simply good. It's really, really well done. If you think all tempered glass cases are the same, they really aren't. This side panel is well designed. Some other features I like of this case, there are 2 2.5-inch SSD mounting points right here. There is a radiator mounting point in the front. There's a radiator mounting point on the top, so you could actually support dual radiators in here if you want. There's nothing blocking those front fans inside. There is plenty of airflow. You have a nice shroud here covering the power supply. You have plenty of room for a full-size ATX motherboard. There is cable management down here. You can't see it, but it is there for these, so you're not running cables all over the place. There are nice cable management spots right here. I'll be honest, this case has gotten flack from the review community. A number of reviewers have maybe not said the nicest things about it, and many of them are correct with some of its maybe deficiencies depending upon your point of view. I will do a review of this case before I build it and put all this giveaway stuff into it. Suffice it to say, the front panel and the top panel come off really easy. You do not want to be moving this around once it's built because they just come off too easily. But some people like that, and the truth of the matter is, if you build your computer and put it in one spot, it doesn't matter. If you care, they're coming out with a modified version of this case actually this week when I'm filming this video, and it's got a mesh front instead of the plexiglass front, and it's got a couple of other changes, but the top and the front are more secure and a few other revisions. If you're interested, you can certainly check that out. When it goes on sale, I'll link it down in the description below. But currently, this case is discounted. It's been discounted and rebated several times, and if this case is $20, $30, $40 less expensive than the new one, if you're doing a Ryzen 5 1600 or a Ryzen 7 1700 at 3.7 gigahertz, you don't need the mesh front panel or any of the other stuff. If you like the clean look, if you like the plexiglass instead of mesh on the front, yes, I would still buy this case. The room and expansion in here, the customization options, the cable management, the multiple radiator mounting points, the room for any size power supply in the bottom, it's a well-built, nicely designed case that is currently available discounted. Again, links to everything in the description below. I'm going to look forward to building on this. It's very sharp looking. Now, having said all of that, Cooler Master is not the only company that makes cases. Certainly there is Corsair, there's NZXT, there is Fractal Design, and many others. Now, I primarily review Corsair and Cooler Master cases on my channel. Many people in the comments beneath my various case reviews say, well, why don't you check out Fractal Design, or why aren't you reviewing the new Phalanx this, or however you pronounce it. The reality, Cooler Master and Corsair send me cases, and those companies don't. I have reached out to them. Send me cases, guys, if you want them reviewed. I will cover them with the same reviews that I've done with these, but I can't afford to buy every case on the planet. There's just too many of them, so send them to me and I'll cover them. It really is pretty much as simple as that. I will say that we are living in a really good time for cases. I remember building in cases 10, 15 plus years ago, and there were a lot fewer really good case choices. There are far fewer bad cases today than there used to be. I was building computers back in the 90s. Cases today are miles ahead of where they used to be, even if you aren't a huge fan of RGB. Next up, we have cooler choices. Now, I already talked during the CPU portion about the fact that, frankly, the deal is a Ryzen 7 1700 using the included Wraithspire RGB cooler, or the Ryzen 5 1600 using the non-RGB Wraithspire cooler. Set them to 3.7, be happy. But if for whatever reason you want a different cooler, you want RGB, or you just already have something else, all of these coolers are in the $50 to $60 price range. Yes, this 240 millimeter liquid cooler is basically the same price as the rest of these. On the day I filmed this video, that was $59. That is the deal in liquid coolers. That being said, while it's probably the best cooler I have on the table here, not by as much as you'd think. It's good, but in my experience, if you go liquid cooling, I really think that you're going i7-8700K, your Skylake X, your Threadripper, you're going 280, 360 millimeter. This is a fine choice, and it will mount very nicely in a case like that. But the truth of the matter is, this cooler is close to its same performance, and it's about $20 less expensive and doesn't require liquid and is easier to install, in all honesty. Same thing with these two coolers. Now, these are a bit more than the Cooler Master, and they don't have RGB, but they do have something that these don't, quieter fans. The fact of the matter is, nobody in this business that I have used or experienced beats Be Quiet and Noctua for the sound of the fans. If you want a silent system, that's why you buy these. Superior performance, superior build quality. These cost less. They may even cool slightly better, but they're slightly noisier and slightly bulkier, especially this U9S. This thing is so small. I've done a review on this. I showed it to you on my Skylake X. It handled the Skylake X 10 core just fine. It'll certainly handle that 8 core without a problem. I would not go more expensive than $60. If you're spending more than that, you probably want to spend more on your overall machine. you can absolutely spend 120, 150 or more on a super fancy cooler. NZXT just recently came out with their Kraken X72 360mm RGB cooler for $200. I'm sure it's wonderful. If they send me one, I'll review it. But the caveat that I will give it is it's $200. It better be going into a pretty fancy machine. You might as well buy a nicer processor or a nicer graphics card before you try to get another 100 megahertz out of your CPU. If you spend $120+ on your cooling and then have to go down on your graphics card, the extra 100 or 200 megahertz on the CPU is not going to make up for the loss of performance elsewhere in your system. You really only want to go really big and really hard on your CPU once you've gone big on your graphics card. Now, some of you might say, well, can you go cheaper than this? Yes, you can. A Hyper 212 Evo, one of the most popular coolers on the market, you can find them in the $20, $30 price range all day long. Will a Hyper 212 Evo cool a Ryzen 7 1700 at 3.7 gigahertz on all the cores? Yes, it will. It'll probably do 3.8. But if you're going to do that, why? Just get the 1700 and use the Racepire cooler. Now, the Racepire cooler is a 95 watt TDP cooler, whereas the Hyper 212 Evo is, I believe, 140 watts. But that's not the big difference that you think it is. If you're going to buy that and spend the extra money on the 1700X, step up to the 6 heat pipe cooler that I've got here. Notice I don't have, there's a 4 heat pipe RGB version of this, and it saves you a couple of dollars. But if you're going with an X chip, if you're trying to go the extra mile, get the 6 heat pipe cooler at least, or one of these. I personally think that the $20, $30 coolers are good retrofit coolers for fail coolers. They're good coolers for locked or budget systems. If you're going with an X or a K chip, yeah, you need to be spending at least $60 on your cooler. The $30 coolers, I don't think are enough of an improvement. Now, what about the power supply? Now, we have a very nice 650 watt power supply in our Ryzen 7 1700X that has enough room for future graphics cards upgrades. It is overkill for the system as built. This budget 450 watt power supply would be absolutely plenty for the system as built with a GTX 1060 and then this CPU, which frankly, when I configure it, I'm going to run it at 3.7, maybe 3.8 gigahertz with this cooler. I don't think it'll do 4.0. But the 650 watts, or thereabouts, 620 here, etc., gives you enough room that maybe 6 months, a year from now, if the graphics card market settles down, you might upgrade to either a 1080 or 1080 Ti or the new 2080 whenever it comes out. You certainly will have that margin. However, you probably will also be able to run a 2080 on the 450 as well. Modern graphics cards, at least on the Nvidia side, don't pull as much power as you think. So you don't need that much, but the price difference between the various power supplies is not large. 450, 550, 620, 650. These are all in the $40 to $60 price range. There's not a huge price difference here. I will say, and I have covered and reviewed, well, I haven't done that one yet, but I will. But I have done reviews on these. I've done builds on these two. I have not on this one yet, but I've done on other Seasonics. They're excellent. Warranty, brand preference, design, modular, semi-modular, etc., black cables, ketchup and mustard colored cables, although actually none of these have those. It's just really personal preference and price. If you don't think you're upgrading for a while, or if you're building, say, a Ryzen 5 1600 non-X chip, and you think you're going to keep your graphics card for 3 years, honestly, the 450 BT from EVGA is a great value for the money. It goes on sale quite often as well. Or if you want a longer warranty, the Seasonic has one of the best warranties in the business. Or if you simply want a matching setup to your Cooler Master case, that's why we have a Cooler Master power supply. Because in all honesty, Cooler Master sent me one. If you buy from these brands, you're not going to go wrong. Everything that these brands make, I would put into any of my machines. So again, price, wattage, features, personal preference. Now that's everything in this system. I didn't talk about hard drives because that's basically bulk storage at this point. Get as much as you need to store your files and whatnot. The other thing I didn't talk about earlier with the CPUs is the fact that in possibly a month, maybe 6 weeks, AMD is rumored to be releasing the 2000 series of the rest of the second generation of Ryzen chips. This is not Zen 2, mind you. The benchmarks have been leaked online. I do not have samples myself, or I couldn't talk to you about it. But the short version is they're like 200 megahertz faster and basically sort of the same thing. We are going to be getting 400 series motherboards, which will be refinements of the current boards. I don't expect major changes. If you aren't building right now, if you can wait a couple of weeks or perhaps a month, maybe 6 weeks, then yes, there will be slightly faster versions of the CPUs. That being said, it might still be worth buying the current ones. Currently, when I'm filming this on Amazon, $279 for a Ryzen 7 1700 with the RGB Spire cooler. When the Ryzen 7 2700 comes out, if it's $350 and it's 200 megahertz faster, that's actually not that much of a deal. You might be better off buying the current one. In fact, if you're going with aftermarket cooling, from what I've seen online, a Ryzen 7 1700X at stock is probably going to be similar in performance to the 2700 non-X. Now, the 1700X doesn't come with a cooler, but again, if you're going to do that, if you can currently buy the 1700X for $299, it's only $20 more. So while yes, there are new chips coming, I see a lot of hype online from people really excited going, man, these new chips are coming, it's going to solve all the problems and get us faster clock speeds. And yeah, it's not going to be a huge difference. It's going to be a couple hundred megahertz, minor refinements to the boards, a minor tick to RAM speed. DDR4 3200 will be a little bit better supported, but it's already pretty good on the current boards with current BIOSes. It'll be nice. But if it's more expensive at launch and these get discounted, don't ignore the 1000 series from AMD just because they're the 1000 series if you can get them at a really good price. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below and click that bell button if you want to be notified of all of my videos. Without the bell button clicked, you only get some notifications. Comments down below, check the links in the video description, links to Newegg and Amazon for all the good stuff I've shown here. Those are affiliate links. They do support the channel. And if you like what you saw here, if you found this advice helpful, useful, and you got to the end of this video, please consider using those when shopping. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video.